I always arrived at work 40 minutes before Tristan. It had become a habit to be in the office before the other employees began to fill the small space of the construction company, Block & Sons. Although after the wedding, the name should have been changed, considering that Old Block had only one son, my husband, and Old Block had been dead for 3 years. At 6 in the morning, the streets of Brownsburg were still empty. The provincial town was waking up slowly, and only a few workers could be seen in the pre-dawn mist. I parked my beat-up Ford near the office and rummaged in my bag for a set of keys. Tristan had never given me a spare. I had made these myself, a small act of defiance that my husband knew nothing about. The office greeted me with its usual silence. I turned on the lights, the coffee machine, and the computer, always in the same order. My morning rituals helped me create the illusion of control over a life that was actually controlled by my mother-in-law and husband. Today, I had to finish the quarterly report for the tax office. I usually found this kind of work easy. Numbers had always been my strong point. Perhaps my only strong point, if Agatha Block was to be believed. "At least you're good for something, dear," she would say, looking over my perfectly compiled tables. By 7 o'clock, I was already immersed in my work when the doorbell rang. Too early for Tristan and too late for the mail. "Good morning, bride-to-be." I flinched. Agatha. Only she could say the word bride-to-be as if it were a curse. "Good morning," I replied, without taking my eyes off the monitor. Agatha walked through the reception area, carrying her heavy body regally. At 63, she still dyed her hair an aggressive red and wore high-heeled shoes that made her walk like a heron in a swamp. "I see you're poring over papers again," she said, stopping at my desk and placing her bulky bag on it. "Quarterly report," I replied curtly. She drawled. "And how's it going?" Something in her tone made me wary. Agatha wasn't usually interested in my work, preferring to simply criticize the results. "Everything's fine. I'll be done by lunchtime." "Wonderful," she smiled, revealing her perfect dentures. "Tristan will be late today. He has a meeting with some new clients." "He didn't tell me." "He should have?" Agatha raised a carefully drawn eyebrow. "After all, you're just helping out here." I clenched my teeth. 3 years of working for the company, thousands of hours spent preparing estimates, maintaining records, communicating with clients, and all of it was just helping out. "I'm finishing the report," I repeated, returning to my screen. Agatha stood there for a few more seconds, then snorted and retired to her son's office, which had once belonged to her husband. She still considered it her territory. Around 11 o'clock, the office filled with its usual bustle. Foreman Lenny, 2 girls from the sales department, and Secretary Doris arrived. They all greeted me politely, but I always saw the same thing in their eyes, a mixture of pity and confusion. The boss's wife working as a regular clerk was a strange sight in Little Brownsburg. Before lunch, I finished the report and double-checked the figures 3 times. Something was bothering me. There was a small discrepancy in the March figures. I looked through all the accounts again but couldn't find the mistake. Sighing, I decided to leave it for later. Maybe a fresh pair of eyes would help. I saved the file and sent it to print. The dining room on the first floor was noisy. Workers from various companies that occupied the building gathered here for lunch. I took a tray with a salad and sat down at a table in the corner. I didn't feel like eating. My thoughts revolved around the mistake in the report. "Can I join you?" Doris stood next to a tray piled high with lasagna, clearly exceeding her daily calorie intake. "Sure," I said, moving over to make room. Doris was the only one who sometimes kept me company at lunch. She was over 40, twice divorced, and possessed that special wisdom that comes only through disappointment. "Agatha is on the warpath today," she remarked, attacking her lasagna with the enthusiasm of an archaeologist who had discovered a new pyramid. "When isn't she on the warpath?" I said, listlessly picking at my salad. "Did you notice she brought in the old files? The ones from the archives?" Doris lowered her voice to a conspiratorial whisper. I shook my head. "She's digging through last year's documents." "She's looking for something." Doris raised her eyebrows meaningfully. "Let her look," I shrugged. "Our paperwork is in order." "In order?" she snorted. "Sweetheart, nothing is ever in order in this company, especially when Mommy decides to tidy things up." I felt nausea rising in my throat. Maybe Agatha knew something about the mistake in the report? But how? I only noticed the discrepancy today, and even then completely by accident. After lunch, I went back to work, but I couldn't concentrate. At 2 o'clock, Tristan walked into the office. His light brown hair was styled with the precision that only expensive salons can provide, and his suit fit his athletic figure perfectly. Outwardly, my husband always looked like a successful businessman, even though the company had been barely staying afloat for the past few years. "Meryl," he nodded at me as if I were one of his employees, not the woman he had woken up next to for the past 5 years. "Hi," I tried to smile. "How was the meeting?" Tristan frowned. "Did Mom tell you?" He glanced at his office door. "Everything's fine. Nothing special." He walked past me, leaving a trail of expensive cologne in his wake. I watched him go, trying to remember the last time he had really talked to me, not about work or business, but just talked to me like a husband talks to his wife. 15 minutes later, his office door swung open. "Meryl!" Tristan's voice sounded sharp. "Come in." I felt a chill run down my spine. Something was wrong. I got up from my desk, straightened my skirt, and walked into my husband's office. Agatha was sitting in the visitor's chair with her hands folded on her knees like a diligent schoolgirl. Her face betrayed her poorly concealed triumph. "Close the door," Tristan said. I obeyed. Tristan stood behind his desk, leaning on it with his knuckles. In front of him lay the printed report I had compiled. "What's this?" he asked, pointing to the papers. "The quarterly report for the tax office," I replied, feeling my mouth go dry. "And you think it's ready to send?" I noticed a small discrepancy in the March figures," I began. "I was going to double-check after lunch." "A small discrepancy?" Tristan picked up one of the sheets. "You entered the wrong amount of tax paid. It's $2,000 less than we actually paid." "It's a typo. I'll correct it," I said quickly. "A typo?" Agatha interjected. "Or deliberate falsification of documents?" "What?" I looked at her in bewilderment. "Of course it's a typo. Why would I falsify a report?" "I don't know, sweetheart," Agatha smiled. "Maybe you decided to earn a little extra money?" "Agatha." I felt the blood rush to my face. "You can't be serious. I would never—" "It doesn't matter," Tristan interrupted. "What matters is that this report with the mistake could have gone to the tax authorities. Can you imagine the consequences?" "But I told you I noticed the mistake and was going to correct it." I began to get angry. "It's a simple human error, a typo." "There's no room for mistakes in business," Tristan snapped, "especially in documents for the tax authorities." Agatha nodded like a Chinese bobblehead with every word her son said. "I think, Meryl," Tristan continued, avoiding my gaze, "we need to reconsider your involvement in the company." "What does that mean?" I felt myself go cold inside. "It means," Agatha couldn't hide the triumph in her voice, "that your services are no longer required, dear." "You're firing me?" I looked at my husband. "Seriously? Because of one typo?" "It's not just a typo." Tristan finally looked at me. "It's indicative. You can't handle the responsibility. And, to be honest, I've been thinking for a long time that you should focus on other aspects of our life." "What other aspects?" I couldn't believe my ears. "Well, for example, the house," he shrugged. "Or maybe it's time to think about children." "Children?" I almost laughed. "You haven't touched me in months, and now you're talking about children?" Tristan frowned. "Let's not discuss this in front of Mom." "Oh, Agatha knows everything about our intimate life." I couldn't stop myself. "She seems to control even that." "Meryl," Tristan raised his voice. "Enough. The decision has been made. As of today, you no longer work for the company." "And what am I supposed to do at home?" I asked. "Work on your washing machine?" "Don't be dramatic," he said, rubbing his forehead wearily. "You're my wife. I'll provide for you as I should." "Like a doll? Or a decorative dog?" "Like a wife, damn it." Tristan slammed his fist on the table. "Why do you always have to make everything so complicated?" "I make it complicated?" I felt tears welling up in my eyes, but I held them back desperately. "You're kicking me out of the company because of a stupid typo." It's not because of a typo, Agatha said calmly. It's because you never should have been here in the first place. A woman should take care of her family, not meddle in men's business. Welcome to the 21st century, Agatha, I snapped. Women can work now. Of course they can, dear, she smiled. But not all women are married to Tristan Block. I glanced at my husband, expecting him to respond to his mother's words in some way, but he remained silent, studying his shoes. So that's how it is, I said, straightening up. You're firing me, officially? Yes, Tristan nodded. Doris will take care of all the paperwork. When should I leave? You can finish the day, he shrugged. Hand over your work to Doris. How generous. I couldn't hold back the sarcasm. We'll discuss this at home? There's nothing to discuss, Meryl. The decision has been made. I nodded, turned, and left the office, closing the door quietly behind me. Everyone in the reception area pretended to be busy, but I could see from their faces that they had heard everything. I walked over to my desk, sat down, and stared at the computer screen, not seeing it. 3 years of work. 3 years of being the first to arrive and the last to leave. 3 years of pulling projects out of financial ruin that Tristan had nearly ruined with his ambitious but ill-considered decisions. 3 years of calming angry clients and finding compromises with suppliers. And it all ended because of a typo that I noticed myself and was going to fix. Doris came up to me and put her hand on my shoulder. I heard, she said quietly. I'm so sorry. It's okay, I tried to smile. Maybe it's for the best. Nonsense, Doris shook her head. It's Agatha. She's wanted to get rid of you for a long time. She just found an excuse. I knew she was right. Agatha had never hidden her feelings for me. To her, I was never good enough for her precious son. Not pretty enough, not smart enough, not from a good enough family. The last part was especially funny, considering that my father owned a business 10 times larger than the Blocks Company. But he never flaunted our relationship, and few people in Brownsburg knew that I was the daughter of Eustace Pembroke. The rest of the day passed in a fog. I mechanically handed over my work to Doris, explaining where everything was, which reports needed to be submitted, and when. She nodded, took notes, and occasionally asked for clarification, but I could see in her eyes what I felt myself, that this was wrong. At 5 o'clock, I gathered my things, a few photographs, a mug, a phone charger, and put them in a cardboard box that Doris had brought. It's funny, but in 3 years, I had accumulated so little personal belongings at work that everything fit into one small box. Tristan never left the office for the rest of the day. I knew he was avoiding me, hiding behind the door like a coward. Agatha left around 4, giving me a triumphant smile as she left. I left the office at exactly 5 o'clock. I got into my car, put the box on the passenger seat, and just sat there for a while, staring ahead. Then I started the engine and drove off. Not home. I wasn't ready to go back there yet. I headed for the only person who, despite our complicated history, could listen to me now. My father's office was on the other side of town, in a modern glass building that stood out among the old buildings of Brownsburg like a spaceship among carts. I parked in the visitor's lot and looked at myself in the rearview mirror. My eyes were red, but there were no tears. I couldn't even cry. My father's secretary, Mrs. Coalfield, greeted me with surprise. Miss Pembroke! She still called me by my maiden name, ignoring the fact that I had been married for 5 years. We weren't expecting you today. Is my father in? I asked, ignoring the formalities. Yes, but he has a meeting in 20 minutes. I won't be long, I said, walking past her to my father's office. Knocking and not waiting for a reply, I entered. Eustace Pembroke was sitting at a huge desk, studying some documents. He looked up, and for a moment, surprise flashed across his face, quickly replaced by his usual impassive expression. Meryl, he nodded. Is something wrong? I got fired, I said without preamble, sitting down in the chair opposite him. Fired? He raised an eyebrow. Tristan? Yes, Agatha, through Tristan, actually. My father leaned back in his chair, folding his arms across his stomach. At 57, he was still an attractive man, tall with smoothly combed gray hair and piercing blue eyes. He remained silent, waiting for me to continue. I made a mistake in the report, I continued. A typo. I noticed it myself and was going to correct it. But Agatha blew it out of proportion, and Tristan, he just agreed with her as always. "And that's why you're here?" my father asked. "Do you want me to call your husband and give him a piece of my mind?" "No." I shook my head. I don't know. I needed to talk to someone." "And you chose me?" There was a hint of irony in his voice. Interesting choice. I almost regretted coming. My father had never been particularly emotional or supportive. Our relationship had always been complicated, especially after my mother died when I was 13. He threw himself into his work, and I was left alone with my grief. "I don't know what to do next," I admitted. "What do you want to do?" He looked at me as if it were a business conversation. "I don't know," I shrugged. "Maybe find another job. Something in accounting or administration." "You have experience," he nodded. 3 years at a construction company. That's something." "Yes, but—" I hesitated. "Everyone in Brownsburg knows I'm Tristan's wife. Who's going to hire a woman who was fired by her own husband?" My father tapped his fingers on the table, looking past me. "Maybe you should sort out your marriage first," he said finally, "and then think about work." "What do you mean?" "I mean it, Meryl. If your husband fires you because of his mother, that says a lot, doesn't it?" I was silent. He was right, of course. My marriage to Tristan had been falling apart for a long time, but we both pretended that everything was fine. Work was the only place where I felt useful, needed. And now that was being taken away from me. "I'm not ready to talk about divorce," I said quietly. "I didn't say divorce," my father shrugged. "I said prioritize." The intercom interrupted our conversation. Mrs. Colefield's voice announced that the visitors for the meeting had arrived. "I have to go," I said, standing up. "Meryl," my father also stood up. "Let me know what you decide." I nodded and headed for the door. "And, Meryl?" His voice stopped me. "Don't jump to conclusions. Sometimes people surprise us." I turned around, surprised by his words, but my father's face was inscrutable as always. He was already looking back at his documents, as if our conversation had never happened. As I left the building, I breathed in the evening air. Ahead of me was a conversation with Tristan that I didn't know how to start. Ahead of me was uncertainty that frightened me more than I could admit. But for some reason, my father's words stuck in my head. Sometimes people surprise us. I didn't know what he meant, but for some reason it seemed to me that something like concern flashed in his eyes for a moment. No, that was impossible. Eustace Pembroke didn't know how to care. At least not about me. I apologize for exceeding the word limit. I will count the characters and write the chapter strictly adhering to the specified length, 10,000, 12,000 characters without spaces. The first week at home was like a strange vacation, the kind where you're free but you don't know what to do with yourself. I woke up at the same time as usual, out of habit, but instead of rushing to the office, I wandered aimlessly around the empty house. Tristan left early and came back late, avoiding any conversation about my dismissal. We didn't talk at all on that first night after I was fired. I came home late, when Tristan was already asleep, or pretending to be asleep. In the morning he left before I woke up, and so it went on, day after day, creating the illusion that we were just roommates who happened to share a bed but never crossed paths. On the 4th day, I decided to tidy up the house. Not that it was messy. I always kept our small 2-story house clean, but now I needed something to occupy my hands and my mind. I started with the kitchen, washing every cupboard inside, sorting the spices alphabetically, washing all the dishes we hardly ever used. When the kitchen was done, I moved on to the living room, then to Tristan's study. I rarely went in there. It was his territory, as he liked to remind me. But now, with a vacuum cleaner in my hands and determination in my heart, I crossed the threshold. The study was surprisingly untidy for such a meticulous man as my husband. Stacks of papers were piled up on the desk, and folders with documents were scattered everywhere. I began to fold them neatly, trying not to disturb the order, if there was any. Among the papers, I came across several bills marked overdue and final warning. The company had never been in great financial shape, but it had never come to late payments. I made sure of that. At the bottom of the pile, I found an envelope with the bank's logo. I knew I shouldn't open it, but something compelled me to do so. Inside was a notice that the credit line had been suspended due to several missed payments. It was dated the day before yesterday. I sat on the floor of my office, clutching the letter in my hands, feeling a sense of anxiety growing inside me. If the bank had suspended the credit line, how would the company pay its suppliers? How would salaries be paid? I knew that after I left, Doris had taken over some of my responsibilities, but Tristan was now in charge of finances, and, judging by the looks of things, not very successfully. I carefully put the letter back in the envelope and placed it in a prominent place. Maybe I should talk to Tristan about this. But what right did I have to interfere in company affairs now? He had made it clear that my involvement was no longer required. In the evening, when Tristan came home, I made dinner, the first in a long time. We usually ate something quick or ordered in, but today I decided to make his favorite dish: steak and mashed potatoes. While I was busy in the kitchen, Tristan went into his study. A few minutes later, muffled cursing came from there. He appeared in the kitchen with a red face and a letter from the bank in his hand. "Have you been going through my things?" he asked instead of saying hello. "I was cleaning up," I replied calmly, turning the steak over. "And you happened to see the letter?" "Happened to see it," he snorted. "And, of course, you happened to open it?" "It was already open," I lied. "Tristan, what's going on with the company?" "Nothing much," he said, throwing the letter on the kitchen table. "Temporary difficulties. The bank suspended your line of credit. That's not temporary." I turned off the stove and turned to him. "How are you going to pay the suppliers?" "We," he emphasized the word, "will manage. It's not your concern, Meryl." "Not mine?" I felt anger boiling up inside me. "I worked at that company for 3 years, Tristan. For 3 years I kept track of every bill, every payment. And never, do you hear me? Never did we miss a loan payment." "Well, you don't work there anymore," he shrugged. "I'll manage on my own." "How are you managing now?" I pointed to the letter. "Is this what you call managing?" Tristan clenched his jaw, and I saw a vein throbbing in his temple, a sure sign that he was really angry. "I'm not going to discuss company business with you," he said coldly. "I've got everything under control." "Sure," I said, returning to the stove. "That's why you come home every day with such a happy face." "What does that mean?" "It means I can see how exhausted you are, Tristan. I can see that something's wrong, and I could help if you weren't so damn stubborn." "I don't need your help," he raised his voice. "I need you to take care of the house like a normal wife." "A normal wife?" I laughed bitterly. "And what does a normal wife do, Tristan? Cook dinner and wait for her husband? Pretend everything is fine when her husband is ruining the business? I'm not ruining the business." He slammed his fist on the table. "We're having some financial difficulties, which I'll sort out." "Without a line of credit? Without working capital? How, Tristan? How are you going to pay the salaries at the end of the month?" He was silent, and his silence spoke louder than any words. "You don't even know, do you?" I shook my head. "God, Tristan." "I'll figure it out," he repeated, but without his previous confidence. "I'll find a way." "How? Ask your mommy for money?" It was a low blow, and I knew it. Agatha never helped her son financially, believing that he had to achieve success on his own. That was the only thing I agreed with her about. "I'm not going to discuss this," Tristan said, turning and leaving the kitchen. A few minutes later, I heard the front door slam. Dinner remained untouched. I sat down at the table, staring at the cooling steak and the letter from the bank. Something was going on with the company, something serious, and as angry as I was with Tristan, I couldn't help but worry. This company wasn't just his life, it was mine too, until recently. The next day, I decided to call Doris. She was the only person in the company I could trust. "Oh, Meryl." Her voice sounded tired even over the phone. "You have no idea what's going on here." "Tell me." I sat down on the sofa, preparing for a long conversation. "After you left, everything went haywire," she began. "I'm trying to sort through the paperwork, but you know I've never done anything with finances. And Tristan, he's too proud to ask for help and too stubborn to admit he can't handle it." "What about Agatha?" "She's here every day." Doris lowered her voice. She tells everyone what to do, but she just gets in the way. Lenny has already threatened to quit if she doesn't stop meddling in his work. Foremen don't grow on trees, I remarked, especially ones like Lenny. I know, but try explaining that to Agatha. She thinks no one is irreplaceable. Except herself, of course. Doris chuckled. Of course. Oh, and another thing. We're having problems with Carlson. Carlson was one of the company's biggest clients. We were building a shopping center for him, a project that was supposed to bring in a good profit. What kind of problems? He's unhappy with how the construction is going. He says the deadlines are being missed. The materials aren't what was promised. Tristan is trying to calm him down, but Carlson is demanding a revision of the contract. A revision in what direction? Downward, of course, Doris sighed. 20%, I whistled. 20% was practically all the profit from the project. Tristan can't agree to that. He won't, but Carlson is threatening to terminate the contract and sue for breach of contract. Damn, I rubbed my forehead. This is serious. I know, and there's something else. Doris hesitated. I probably shouldn't tell you this, but... What, Doris? Tristan missed a loan payment. The bank sent a notice. I know, I sighed. I saw the letter. He's trying to find the money, but no one wants to give a loan to a company with a suspended credit line. What about the other projects? They're moving forward, but slowly. Without working capital, it's difficult to buy materials and pay subcontractors. I closed my eyes. The situation was worse than I thought. The company was on the verge of collapse, all because of Tristan's stubbornness and Agatha's manipulation. Thanks for telling me, Doris, I said finally. Keep me posted, okay? Of course, dear. And, Meryl? Yes? We all miss you. The office isn't the same without you. After talking to Doris, I sat on the sofa for a long time, thinking about the situation. Part of me wanted to gloat, let Tristan deal with the mess he'd created. But another part, the part that still loved him despite everything, was worried. I decided to call my father. I don't know why. We rarely talked, and I wasn't sure he'd even want to talk to me after our last meeting. To my surprise, he answered right away. Meryl. His voice sounded as if he'd been expecting my call. How are you? Fine, I replied automatically. Dad, I have a question. I'm listening. Have you heard anything about problems at Tristan's company? There was a pause on the other end of the line. What makes you think I'm interested in your husband's business? Well, you always... I stammered. You always know what's going on in town. Especially in business circles. Let's say I do, he said after a moment. Yes, I've heard something. The company is having financial difficulties. The bank has suspended its line of credit. There are problems with a major client. Carlson, if I'm not mistaken. How do you know about Carlson? I was surprised. I have my sources, my father replied evasively. What else are you interested in? I don't know, I admitted. I just wanted to understand how serious it is. Serious enough. His voice became harsher. If Tristan doesn't find the money soon, the company could go bankrupt. And then what? Then the creditors will take everything they can, including your house if it's mortgaged. I swallowed. Our house was mortgaged. Tristan had put it up as collateral when he took out a loan to expand the business 2 years ago. Is there anything I can do to help? I asked, not knowing what I was expecting. You? My father's voice betrayed his surprise. You want to help the man who fired you? He's my husband, I said quietly. No matter what. My father sighed. Meryl, listen to me carefully. Don't get involved. Let things take their course. What do you mean? It means that sometimes people need to fall to realize how high they were, my father said mysteriously. Just trust me. Trust you? I almost laughed. Since when do I have to trust you, Dad? Since I became the only one who can really help your husband, he replied calmly. But only if he deserves it. I was silent, digesting his words. What did he mean? Was he going to help Tristan financially? Or did he have some other plan? Meryl. My father's voice brought me back to reality. Stay out of this. Promise me. I can't, I replied honestly. It's my life too, Dad. Stubborn like your mother, he sighed. And for a moment, I heard a warmth in his voice that I rarely heard. "All right, do what you think is best, but don't say I didn't warn you." After talking to my father, I felt even more confused. What was he up to? And why did he ask me not to get involved? Tristan continued to come home late, and sometimes I heard him talking on the phone in his office late into the night. The dark circles under his eyes became more noticeable, and his expression grew increasingly tense. Several times I tried to talk to him about the company, but he dismissed me, saying that everything was under control. But I knew that wasn't true. I learned from Doris that the meeting with Carlson had gone badly. He was adamant in his demand for a price reduction. Tristan refused, and now Carlson was threatening to terminate the contract. This would be a serious blow to the company's reputation, not to mention the financial losses. Doris also told me that Agatha had started coming into the office more often than usual. She was sticking her nose into everything, criticizing employees, and constantly reminding everyone that she was the real boss, not her son. One morning, almost 2 weeks after I was fired, Doris called me. "Meryl, you won't believe it," she said excitedly. "Your father was just here." My father? I couldn't believe my ears. At Tristan's office? Yes. He arrived about an hour ago and talked to Tristan in his office for a long time. I don't know what they talked about, but when your father left, Tristan looked shocked. Was Agatha there? No, thank God. She's supposed to come by later, but Meryl, your father brought some documents with him. And he looked very serious. I felt my stomach tighten. What was my father up to? Why had he come to see Tristan? And what were these documents? Doris, keep me posted, okay? I tried to sound calm, even though my heart was racing. Of course, dear. I'll call you as soon as I find out anything. After talking to Doris, I couldn't sit still. I paced around the house, trying to keep myself busy, but my thoughts kept returning to my father and his visit to Tristan. What could he have offered? And why didn't he tell me about it? The office greeted me with its usual buzz of voices and the chatter of printers. I had only been back at work for 2 days, and it already felt like those 2 weeks of forced vacation had never happened. My coworkers greeted me with sincere smiles, all except Agatha, of course. After her conversation with Tristan, she stopped coming into the office every day, but when she did, she made a point of pretending I didn't exist. That morning, I arrived earlier than usual. I needed to sort out the accumulated bills and prepare for a meeting with the bank to discuss the renewal of our credit line. I turned on my computer and immersed myself in my work, hardly noticing how the office was gradually filling up with people. Around 10 o'clock, the door swung open and my father entered the reception area. Eustace Pembroke always knew how to make an entrance. Tall, impeccably dressed, with a straight back and an authoritative gaze. Today, he looked particularly determined. "Good morning, Doris," he nodded to the secretary. "Meryl," he glanced briefly in my direction. "Is Tristan in his office?" "Yes, Mr. Pembroke." Doris rose from behind her desk. "He's waiting for you." I noticed several employees exchange surprised glances. The visit of Eustace Pembroke, one of the most influential businessmen in the city, was an extraordinary event, especially for those who did not know about our family ties. My father walked into Tristan's office without even glancing in my direction. The door closed behind him and I was left wondering what was going on. Tristan and I had agreed that he would accept my father's offer to supply materials at a discounted price, but I didn't know the details of the agreement. I tried to focus on my work, but my thoughts kept returning to the meeting taking place behind the closed door. What else was my father up to? And why hadn't he told me about it? Half an hour later, the office door opened and Tristan came out. He looked strange, not upset, but rather puzzled. "Meryl," he said, approaching my desk, "your father wants to talk to you. Alone." "With me?" I was surprised. "Why?" Tristan shrugged. "I don't know. We discussed the terms of delivery, signed a preliminary agreement, and then he suddenly said he wanted to talk to you." I got up from my desk, feeling a sense of unease growing inside me. Communicating with my father had always been a challenge for me. You never knew what to expect from him. When I entered the study, I saw my father standing by the window. He was looking out at the street, his hands behind his back, a posture I remembered from childhood. When he turned from that position, it was usually followed by a remark or criticism. "Close the door," he said without turning around. I obeyed. "You wanted to see me?" My father finally turned around. His face was impenetrable, as always. "Yes, I just signed a supply agreement with your husband. We will provide his company with materials on exceptional terms." "I know," I nodded. "Tristan told me. Thank you, that's very helpful for the company." "Not the company," my father said, walking over to the table and leaning on it. "You. Me?" "Yes, Meryl. I'm not doing this for your husband, and I'm certainly not doing it for his business. I'm doing this for you." I was silent, not knowing what to say. My father rarely spoke about his motives, and even more rarely admitted that he was doing something for me. "Why?" I finally asked. "We've never been particularly close, Dad. Why all this concern all of a sudden?" My father sighed and sat down in Tristan's chair. "Sit down," he said, pointing to the chair opposite him. "We need to talk." I sat down, feeling my heart begin to beat faster. "I know I haven't been a model father," he began, looking past me. "After your mother died, I shut myself off. I threw myself into my work. I left you to deal with your grief alone." I was stunned. In my entire life, my father had never admitted his mistakes. He never talked about my mother, and he certainly never apologized. "That was a long time ago," I said, not knowing how to respond. "Yes, it was," he nodded. "But that doesn't mean I stopped being your father, or that I stopped caring about you." "That's a strange way of caring," I said bitterly, ignoring me for years and then suddenly barging into my life without warning. "I've been watching you, Meryl," my father said quietly. "All these years. I knew where you worked, what you did. I knew about your contribution to your husband's company, and I saw how he and his mother treated you." "And you did nothing," I said, feeling a lump rise in my throat. "Until now," he agreed. "I thought you had to deal with it yourself, become stronger. But when he fired you—" My father shook his head. "I realized it had gone too far, and you decided to intervene." "Yes, not just for you, but for myself." He looked me in the eyes. "I don't want to be the kind of father who stands by while his daughter suffers. I've been that for too long." I was silent, shaken by his words. This conversation was the most honest we had ever had. "What's in the contract?" I finally asked. "Besides the discounted prices for materials?" "The condition that you become the company's financial director, with full authority and a decent salary." My father smiled slightly. "And without interference from your mother-in-law." "What if Tristan breaks these terms?" "Then I'll tear up the contract." My father shrugged. "And believe me, his company won't survive that." "That sounds like a threat." "It is a threat." My father didn't deny it. "But not to you, to him. Don't you think that's a little excessive?" I shook my head. "I appreciate your concern, Dad, I really do, but I could handle this myself." "You could," he agreed. "But why, when you have a father who can help?" There was something in those words, so simple and obvious, that touched me deeply. All my life, I had been convinced that I had to cope on my own. My father had taught me that by his absence, and now he was saying he could help, that he wanted to help. "I don't know what to say," I admitted. "Don't say anything." My father stood up. "Just know that I'm always on your side, Meryl, even when it doesn't seem like it." He walked over to the window and looked out again. "I wish we could see each other more often," he said without turning around. "Not just for business. Maybe we could have lunch together sometime, or—" He didn't finish, but I understood. For the first time in many years, my father was trying to mend our relationship. And strange as it seemed, I was willing to give him that chance. "I'd like that, Dad," I said quietly. He nodded, still not turning around. "All right. Now I think we should get back to your husband." He must have a lot of questions. We left the office together. Tristan was waiting for us in the reception area, tapping his fingers nervously on the table. When he saw us, he jumped up. "Is everything okay?" he asked, looking from me to my father and back. "More than okay," my father said, extending his hand. "I'm glad we came to an agreement, Tristan. I'm sure it will be beneficial for all parties." Tristan shook the outstretched hand, still looking a little confused. Yes, of course, Mr. Pembroke. I really appreciate your offer. Call me Eustace. My father smiled. After all, we're almost family. Those words, spoken with a hint of irony, made Tristan swallow nervously. Of course. Eustace. At that moment, the office door swung open, and Agatha entered the reception room. She froze in the doorway when she saw her father. "Ah, Mrs. Block." My father turned to her with that special smile I knew all too well, polite and completely cold. "Just in time. We were just discussing a new agreement between our companies." "Agreement?" Agatha looked at Tristan. "What agreement?" "Mr. Pembroke will be our primary supplier of materials," Tristan replied, trying to sound confident, "on terms that are very favorable to us." "But we already have suppliers." Agatha frowned. "Why would we want to change them?" "Because my prices are 20% below market value," my father replied calmly. "And I'm offering a 60-day payment deferral. I think that would be extremely helpful to your company in the current situation." Agatha narrowed her eyes. "And what do you want in return?" "Nothing is free, Mr. Pembroke." "Indeed," her father smiled even wider. "I want my daughter to take the position of financial director of the company, with full authority and without outside interference." "What?" Agatha almost choked with indignation. "Tristan, you can't agree to that. That woman has already proven her incompetence." "This woman," my father took a step forward, and even I felt the threat emanating from him, "is my daughter, and the only reason your company still exists, Mrs. Block." "How dare you?" Agatha turned red. "Tristan, are you going to let him talk to me like that?" Tristan looked as if he wanted to sink through the floor. "Agatha, please," he began. "Let's discuss this calmly." "There's nothing to discuss," she snapped. "I won't allow that woman to work for the company again. She's fired. And that's final." "No, Agatha," Tristan said unexpectedly firmly. "Meryl is coming back, and she will be the CFO." Agatha looked at her son as if he had hit her. "What did you say?" "You heard me." Tristan straightened up. "Meryl is coming back. That is my decision as CEO, and it is final." "You're choosing her over me? Your own mother?" Agatha's voice trembled with rage. "I'm choosing what's best for the company," Tristan replied. "And right now, that's Meryl and the agreement with Mr. Pembroke. She's manipulating you." Agatha turned her gaze to me. "She's always done it. First, she made you marry her, then she wormed her way into the company, and now she's using her father to pressure you. Enough, Mrs. Block." My father's voice was quiet, but somehow it silenced Agatha. "I've been watching you for many years, watching how you manipulate your son, how you humiliate my daughter, how you undermine her authority in the company, and I kept quiet because I respected Meryl's right to deal with her own problems. But now I'm getting involved, and if you continue, I'll be forced to do something else." "What?" Agatha asked defiantly. "What can you do?" "I can tell your son how you sabotaged Carlson's project," her father replied calmly. "How you deliberately ordered the wrong materials to delay the deadline. How you called Carlson and complained about the company's work, encouraging him to demand a price reduction, all to prove that the company can't do without you. That Meryl couldn't handle it." A dead silence fell over the reception room. Agatha turned pale, and Tristan looked at his mother with shock and disbelief. "Mom?" His voice sounded hoarse. "Is that true?" Agatha opened her mouth, then closed it, unable to find the words. "How did you—" she finally managed, looking at her father. "I have my sources," her father shrugged. "And unlike you, I actually care about my daughter's well-being, and her husband's for that matter." Tristan slowly sank into a chair, still staring at his mother. "You sabotaged Carlson's project?" he asked. "On purpose? To— what? To frame Meryl?" "I did what I thought was best for the company." Agatha finally found her voice. "That woman doesn't deserve to be here. She was never good enough for you, Tristan. Never." "Go away," Tristan said quietly. "Please, Mom. Just get out of here. Now." "Tristan, go away." He raised his voice, and Agatha recoiled as if struck. "I don't want to see you. Not now." Agatha opened her mouth to say something, but then changed her mind. She shot me a look full of hatred, turned and left the office, slamming the door behind her. Silence fell again in the reception area. I could see that Doris and the other employees, who had witnessed the scene, didn't know where to hide their embarrassment. "I think we should continue this conversation in a more private setting," my father said calmly. "Tristan, would you mind if we used your office?" Tristan nodded silently and stood up. The three of us went into the office and I closed the door behind us, blocking out prying eyes. "Sit down," my father said to Tristan. "You look like you're about to collapse." Tristan sank into a chair and covered his face with his hands. "I can't believe it," he said hoarsely. "My own mother." "She always did it," I said, sitting down next to him, "just not so obviously before." "Why didn't you tell me?" He looked at me with pain in his eyes. "Would you have believed me?" I asked quietly. "You always took her side, Tristan, always." He lowered his head, acknowledging the truth of my words. "I'm sorry," he said. "I really am. I was blind." "Don't blame yourself too much," my father said, sitting down opposite us. "Agatha is a master manipulator. She's been doing it for years, and you've grown accustomed to obeying her without even realizing it." "But I should have seen what she was doing to Meryl." Tristan shook his head. "How she treated her, how she humiliated her at every opportunity." "Yes, you should have," my father agreed. "But now you have a chance to make things right." Tristan looked at me. "I want to make things right, Meryl. I mean it. I've been a terrible husband and partner, and I understand if you can't forgive me. But I want to try, to earn your trust again." I looked at him, seeing genuine remorse in his eyes. Part of me wanted to just accept his apology and move on, but another part, the part that had been hurt by his betrayal, demanded more. "It won't be easy, Tristan," I said. "You chose your mother over me. You fired me because of a stupid mistake that I caught myself and was going to fix. How can I trust you again after that?" "I know." He took my hand. "And I'm willing to do whatever it takes to earn that trust back." "That's enough, Meryl." My father coughed, reminding us of his presence. "I think you two have a lot to discuss," he said, standing up. "But not now, not here. You have a company to save, and a contract with Carlson to restore." "You're right," Tristan said, standing up as well. "I should call Carlson, explain the situation, offer compensation for the delay." "I already spoke with him," his father interrupted. "He's agreed to continue working with you on the same terms, provided you guarantee the quality of the materials and meet the new deadlines." You spoke to Carlson?" Tristan was stunned. "Of course," my father smiled. "I always do my homework before getting involved in someone else's business. Carlson is an old acquaintance of mine. He agreed to give your company another chance, on condition that Meryl personally supervises the project." Tristan looked at me. "Do you agree?" I paused, considering the offer. It was a big responsibility, but also a great opportunity to prove my worth, not only to Tristan, but to myself. "Yes," I nodded. "I agree." "Excellent," my father said, moving toward the door. "I'll leave you two alone. I have some business to attend to in town. Meryl," he turned to me, "I'll expect you for dinner on Sunday, 7 o'clock. And Tristan too, if he wants to come." With that, he left, leaving us alone. Tristan looked at me as if he were seeing me for the first time. "Your father is an impressive man," he said finally. "Yes," I smiled. "When he wants to be." "He really cares about you?" "In his own way," I nodded. "It took him a long time to show it, but yes, he cares." Tristan came over to me and gently took my hands. "I was wrong, Meryl. About everything. And I swear I'll never put anyone or anything above you again. Not my mom, not the company, not my pride. Nothing." I looked into his eyes, searching for the truth. And to my surprise, I found it. "I want to believe you, Tristan," I said quietly. "I really do. But I need time. And I need to see that you've really changed, not just with words, but with actions." "I understand," he nodded. "And I'm willing to wait as long as it takes. I'll prove to you that I'm worthy of your trust, of your love." He leaned down and kissed me softly on the cheek, the first show of tenderness in a long time. "Now," he said, straightening up, "I think we need to get back to work. We have a company to save." I nodded, feeling a strange warmth spread through me. Maybe it was hope? or just relief that the nightmare of the past few weeks was finally over. We left the office together, ready to start a new chapter in our lives, as spouses, as partners, as a team. And although I knew there were many problems and challenges ahead, I felt that now we could face them together. I also knew that now I had not only a husband who was ready to fight for our marriage, but also a father who, in his own way, would always be on my side. And that thought gave me the strength and confidence I had so desperately lacked all these years.